Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Foreign Correspondents Club. My name is James Sims. I'm the president of the club. As you know, today's guest speaker probably doesn't need much of an introduction. This is, I believe, his second visit, probably almost in as many months. He is just off a visit to speak at the UN Human Rights Commission about the situation in Okinawa. And as you know, that right now Okinawa and the national government are at loggerheads over the relocation of the Futenma Marine Air Station to Henoko, and the governor is looking to revoke the permits that would allow the construction of the new facility. And if you've been here for any amount of time, you know this issue has been going on for 20 years. 20 years is about the time I've been in Japan as a journalist. So it is an issue that the government, the national government, and the prefectural government are at loggerheads. And now it's taken a different turn where the governor is actually taking it to other forums outside of Japan to try to reach some sort of concession or to try to come to some sort of agreement on the base issue in Okinawa. And anyway, without any further ado, I would like to welcome again the governor of Okinawa, Mr. Takeshi Onaga. Thank you.
Hello. I have just given greetings in Okinawan language. I am Takeshi Onaga, the governor. And on May 20th, I had the opportunity to speak at the Foreign Correspondents Club, and it is a wonderful opportunity to be here again today. Regarding the May press conference, I spoke about the reclamation issue, the Henoko issue, and I hope that by giving you an update and more new information about this matter, we will be able to deepen discussions on this matter. And yesterday, I just returned from Europe. I attended the United Nations Human Rights Council meeting to explain the situation in Okinawa to an international audience. And so I hope to speak briefly at the beginning about what has been happening with Okinawa and then take your questions. And yes, we're going to be having simultaneous interpretation, so I don't have to wait for the interpreter. So after May 20th, what has actually been occurring? I think the biggest change is that from July 9th to September, August 10th to September 12th, we have been having meetings, and we've decided to suspend the reclamation work or boring work, and we think it is a very, very good thing that the Japanese government accepted our request to halt or suspend the construction and related work of Henoko while we proceeded with other matters. Of course, during the intervening month, during these intervening weeks, we have had many discussions about the security legislation occurring in the Diet, and I think frankly that the government put aside the issue of Okinawa because they wanted to very much focus upon the security legislation. We have had 5 meetings between August 12th and September 7th, and we have basically had focused discussions. However, all of the requests and questions that we sent to the government have not really been responded upon, we believe. In the 5 meetings, I have always explained after each meeting in a press conference what exactly we talked about in the meetings. And so I think many people have a general understanding, therefore, what was discussed in these meetings. But again, going back to what has happened after May 20th, the main focus of the discussions in the meetings that we had with the government, the 5 meetings we had with the government, has basically been focused upon the history of what has been happening in Okinawa and what our requests and thoughts are.
Well, the first thing that we took up at the meeting with the Chief Cabinet Secretary Suga, I first met him in April. And including the history of Okinawa, I have tried to talk about my thoughts of Okinawa. I think I've talked most with Mr. Suga, and towards the end of the series of discussions, I asked him whether or not he understood what I was saying, and he said that he was born after the war, and therefore the history of Okinawa after the war was something that he's not very familiar with. But the U.S.-Japan meeting 19 years ago, and the solution was that Henoko is the only solution to Futenma Air Base, and therefore, well, I said that I got the impression that we have been taking different paths over the past 70 years. Now, why is Henoko the only solution? Why is the central government insisting that Henoko is the only solution, whereas Okinawa is insisting that the relocation should be to outside of Okinawa? I'd like to explain this, but Futenma, after the war, well, when we were in the detention camp, or it's not really at the detention camp, but instead they used bulldozers and bayonets to try to occupy 18%. Well, we occupy 18% of the national land, but yes, and this has been confiscated from us. There was not a single piece of land that was offered willingly, and therefore Henoko Air Base, for the first time, the Okinawa was the only place in which we agreed to a relocation. But at the gubernatorial election 4 years ago, the governor was elected on the pledge that the base would be relocated outside of Okinawa. And so this reclamation of the land was a violation of the pledge. And last year, also at the gubernatorial election in Okinawa, and also the general election for the Okinawan seats, those candidates were denying this and opposing the bases won the election. And therefore, I think that this is one thing that we have to emphasize, that it was land confiscation. And 16, 17 years ago, Governor Inamine agreed on conditionally. And it was said that even if it's transferred to Okinawa in 15 years' time, it would be returned to Okinawa. And the fact that it would be an airport used both for commercial and also military purposes. And Hashimoto at cabinet at that time, at a cabinet meeting, said that they will respect the voices of the mayor of Nago as well as Okinawa governor. So it was upon this agreement that was decided. But then Prime Minister Koizumi, 7 years after, Prime Minister Koizumi said that the cabinet meeting agreement is to be nullified. And therefore, the Okinawa Prefecture, we agreed to Henoko conditionally, and this was all neglected. And so we think that this is a mistake to start with. And so I said this to Mr. Suga, that we were not in agreement. And also, Defense Minister Nakatani, we had a lot of discussion on deterrent force. I think that I spent one of the longest time with him discussing this. And what Mr. Nakatani said was that China is a major threat to Japan, and therefore the Okinawa Self-Defense Force scramble has been doubled, tripled in terms of the numbers, and therefore there needs to be, once again, the military forces, and also in Ishigaki, he wanted some hundreds of SDF forces to be deployed, and that was what he was saying. And he said that this would lead the way to enhancing deterrent force of Japan. I, on the other hand, said that for 27 years, when we were lifted from the administration of the United States, we were not a Japanese nor an American, and the U.S. military was using the bases in Okinawa to fight the Vietnam War. And the Japanese economic growth was thanks to the fact that the U.S. military forces were able to freely use Okinawa's land for 27 years. I responded in that way. And also, given those circumstances, I said that For 27 years, the fact that Okinawa served as a military base, well, in those days it was the Soviet Union and the Chinese Communist bloc. There was a lot of uncertainties back then, and it was said that Okinawa was needed as a bedrock. But 40 years have passed since then, and people say that China is a threat. But compared to the Cold War structure, how much of a threat is China? There has not been a single explanation about this. And also within the national security legislation, they were talking about the Strait of Hormuz in the Middle East, also being a target for the deterrent force, and also in the Spratly Islands. If there were to be military advancements to that area, Okinawa is to serve as a base.
I therefore feel that when we're talking about something about the Strait of Hormuz or the Spratly Islands, why is it that Okinawa must be at the forefront of any endeavors to help the United States? Should it not be something that should be a nationwide effort? And why should only Okinawa Prefecture be assigned this huge task? All 41 municipalities in Okinawa and all of the representatives representing all of the cities and municipalities and electoral districts of Okinawa demonstrated in Ginza. However, we really could not get a meeting with the top people in the government, only a 5-minute meeting with some top persons in the government. So from 3 years ago, we have talked with Joseph Nye, Mr. Armitage, Mr. Mochizuki. Many of these people say that Okinawa is actually very close to China, and therefore it might be actually in danger to have too many bases in Okinawa because we're so close to China, and therefore we could be exposed to the missiles from China. Maybe it would be better for the U.S. bases to have Guam and Australia be the places for the U.S. bases because they would be able to, first of all, be more flexible in their response to military endeavors, and they would probably be more safe if they were dispersed and not located only in one location. So again, when I asked Mr. Nakatani about this, what would happen if a missile were directed at Okinawa, Mr. Nakatani said, well, we'll respond by deploying missiles in Okinawa so Okinawa can fight back with missiles of its own. In other words, it's 1.4 million people live in Okinawa. However, I feel that in spite of the fact that the Battle of Okinawa cost over tens of thousands of lives, hundreds of thousands of lives, Mr. Nakatani basically thinks of Okinawa just basically as a territory, something that can be sacrificed for the good of the larger nation. So as a result, that is why I have tried to go to Washington, D.C., and other previous governors and other officials of Okinawa have visited. After the officials of the United States listen to us, however, they meet with us and listen to us, they always come back to us with the same response, which is that we must go back to your country and speak to your own officials, to speak to your own ministers and your own prime minister. And so I do go back, and my predecessors have always come back to Japan. We have spoken with the Minister of Defense, Ministers of Foreign Affairs, et cetera, and we have said that the U.S. officials have told us to come talk with you, but they say to us, it's always the United States that is behind us, and therefore we can't do anything without the United States approving us, so you must talk with the United States directly. In other words, we are shifted from one person to the other over and over again without ever getting any kind of a solution. And so you can understand the structure of Japan from what I've been saying up until now. The last thing, however, that I would like to say is that we are suffering still from the dangers posed by Camp Futema, the most dangerous air base in the world. Mr. Rumsfeld came to Japan over 10 years ago and said there is no more dangerous air base in all of the world. It must be changed in some way. However, we are told that if we don't agree to Henoko relocation, then Futema will be made a permanent facility. In other words, to allow the most dangerous base in the world to be allowed to remain on a permanent base. We cannot get a response on this question. It seems that it is a terrible situation. However, we do not get the kind of responses that we will need. Mr. Yamaguchi, who is the head of the ministry section that is in charge of the budget for Okinawa, he says that Okinawa people should be grateful because we provide lots of money to help the economy there. And there is a misunderstanding there. It always says 300 billion yen allotted to Okinawa at the end of the year, whenever the end of the year budgets are announced. It sounds that as though Okinawa gets something special in addition to what other prefectures get, but that is not the case at all. Over the past 27 years, as I mentioned before, Okinawa people were neither Americans, were neither Japanese. They were not under the jurisdiction of the United States Constitution. They were not protected by the Japanese Constitution either. We were basically an extraterritorial territory. We had never been able to put a representative in the Diet. As a result, we had no one to negotiate for us to get a budget for our islands, the way all of the other prefectures had representatives to get budgets for their own budgets. In other words, all of the other 47 prefectures receive, all of the other 46 prefectures get their budgets as well. And the 300 billion yen or whatever that we get is similar to what other prefectures receive as well. It is used for the same purposes, in other words, to help build public roads, to help support schools, etc., etc. But in other prefectures, there is no special budget name for Niigata Prefecture, etc. In other words, they also receive several hundred billions of yen as well. The naming for the budget for the Okinawa budget is different because of our special history. It is considered to be a budget that is supposed to be able to revitalize the economy, but it is a similar budget to other prefectures. It is just given a special name because of this very extraordinary, unusual, unique history. So it always kind of stands out, however, because always Okinawa sounds as though it's getting a huge budget. However, it is 16th in the list of prefectures in terms of the amount of money that they receive from the national government. In other words, we don't receive a tremendous amount of extra money compared to other prefectures in the world. And again, for 27 years, again, we were ignored. We were not taken care of. For example, in regard to nursery schools, we had no public roads. Public roads were mostly destroyed during the war. Even now, we still do not have great numbers of publicly run nurseries or daycare centers.
And therefore, we don't think that this is exceptionally high. And I think this is the biggest misunderstanding that exists. Up until last year was a mayor. And when I met with the other mayors, they always say that, I asked that the military base should be resolved, and others would say, well, you're hosting the military, but you might as well get money for that and to develop Okinawa, and we envy you. Well, there were a lot of mayors who were saying such things, and it's very difficult to counterattack such arguments. And therefore, up until now, we have been saying these things. And, I want to take this opportunity, if you need some more information, to talk about those things. And so I have met with the 5 ministers, and having done that, I've come to understand that I have to appeal these things to the international community, and that is the reason why I went to the UN Human Rights Council 2-3 days ago to make this statement. And this is the explanation of the series of events that have taken place to this day. And so I'd like to start taking questions.
I'd like to go to questions from the working press. If you haven't, please turn off your cell phone. We'll take one question, no speeches. Please state your name and affiliation. Before we go to a question, I just have a quick question about what was the response from the UN Human Rights Commission, and is there any indication that they would take some sort of action regarding the issue that you presented them with?
Well, the UN Human Rights Council, well, I don't know how many. Well, there were some 200, 300 people attending. Well, in the first half, there were the state representatives. Well, in the front, there were state representatives. In the back, there were NGO representatives dealing with human rights issues. And I was given 2 minutes. And therefore, I tried to explain what I said in just 2 minutes. Now, before I spoke, the representative of North Korea was taking the podium, and therefore there were a lot of things being discussed in regards to human rights. Now, after I made my statement, the Human Rights Council did not give any conclusion on that, but from the Japanese government there was a response, and there was this NGO quota, and it's very unusual that someone who speaks in this quota receives some response from the central government. But what the types of things that the Chief Cabinet Secretary stated was expressed at the UN Human Rights Council, and I was on my way back to Japan, and therefore I did not have any time to rebut what was said by the government. But, for example, it was said that a month ago, the Western Futenma, the 50-hectare land, was returned, and the national government was talking about this, and this is the downsizing of the military bases, and this is a result of such efforts. And the NGO was present there, said saying that it was only some 0.2% or 0.02% of the total military base land. So this 0.1% or 0.2%, the fact that that land was returned was overly emphasized by the national government, which I regret to hear.
Hi, Onaga-san. Joël Lejeune, French television and radio. You are back from Geneva, and the context now is complicated after the adoption of the security bills in Japan in a controversial way. It looks like Okinawa more than ever could become a target, a political fixation for maintaining a pressure on the government. Not only on Okinawa, but also on other issues of defense. How you, Governor, are you going to use this card, this political card, where the people of Japan seem, at the majority, being angry at what Mr. Abe did? How are you going to use it for Okinawa defense, for your policy? Okay?
In regard to the security legislation, in regard to self-defense, collective self-defense, it has a very, very close relationship to that concept. And of course, that's basically means that Japan will be able to better help and support the U.S. military in a much larger scope than ever before. And of course, one of the reasons given was that there are more scrambles. In other words, Chinese invade our airspace more than ever before, and as a result, they are people in the self-defense forces, for example, the government say that we must be able to have a stronger presence and bases in Okinawa to counteract these incursions. But I would like to go back to the basics. I would like to remind you again that all the bases in Okinawa never were voluntarily given. That land was never voluntarily offered to the U.S. military. And we are very, very unhappy about that situation. And on top of that, again, using public waters, those oceans where there's beautiful seagrasses and mammals such as dugongs swimming in these beautiful waters, again, to create another base. This is something that we simply cannot accept. In other words, we understand that the Futenma Air Base is an old facility, and they want to be able to have facilities such as ammunition storage facilities and a much larger, like a 200 larger pier where very, very large ships, 260 meters or more, can dock. We understand the need for these kinds of facilities. We understand what the government of the United States wants to do. The security legislation is something that, of course, many Japanese people are very skeptical about. And in regard to how the law was passed, the actual proceedings, in regard to that, if you look at the opinion polls, I think there are about twice as many people opposed to how it was passed than those who support the passage of the security bill. The skepticism and the doubts and the anxieties that many people in Japan are feeling now about the passage of the security bills are very similar to what the people of Okinawa have felt for decades now about the Japanese government. I think in the future, maybe very many people in Japan, the majority of people in Japan will feel very much like Okinawans have felt for years. In other words, they will begin to basically understand that the people of Okinawa and how we have lived with danger right next door to us for so long. So I believe, in other words, that the Okinawa problem is going to be better understood by the people of Japan than ever before because of the passage of this legislation.
Alden was next, and then Jimbo.
Thank you. My name is Khaldoun Azhari, Panoramic News. Thank you, Governor, for coming today. I've been reporting about Okinawa issue since 20 years, and what I'm doing recently is just take copy from the past reports and change the date and the name and send it. So it's very easy now because the problem is going in circles. Nothing changed. The Japanese government says they want to seek your understanding. You say, no, we don't want you, and then America said it's Japanese issue. And we don't see anything in the horizon to change this. And even when the Democratic Party of Japan, when Mr. Hatoyama came and he said the bases should be out of Okinawa, he had to come back and say, sorry, I withdraw my statement, the bases should be there. So there's no hope for any change, it seems. So why don't you adopt different policy and accept the bases? Because the United States says these bases are good for the prosperity of the world and to make democracy in other countries by getting rid of bad regimes. What do you comment on this? Thank you.
Yes, things are not changing and moving in circles, and therefore, Okinawa 136 years ago was an independent state, and we only have some hundreds of thousands of people, and we're a very small country which was annexed to Japan, and we tried to become an impressive Japanese, and we're not using our dialect, and instead we practice Japanese and try to become a full-fledged Japanese. And what came next was the Second World War 70 years ago, and at that time Okinawa, what happened in Okinawa was that 126,000 people died, and the Japanese military 90,000, and also some 10,000 servicemen of the United States died. And the biggest tragedy was the Okinawan people. They tried to escape, and once they tried caused problem, they were forced to come out of the shelters by the Japanese military. And the more I talk about this, I feel terrible. But anyway, the war ended, and then when the Okinawa people were not there, and if there were the Okinawans there, they bulldozed the lands. We didn't offer these lands. We have no right to self-determination. Without power, these U.S. military bases were built. And then in 1952, the Japanese government said that, 70 years ago, back in 70 years ago, they annexed Okinawa. And then in 1952, they placed Okinawa under the administration of the United States, and we became stateless, so to say. And so currently the U.S. and Japan, these two big powers, are including their self-determination right, and also to protect the human rights of Japan, of the Okinawan people. They are saying that they're listening, and yet we should try to keep quiet. And so I think of that. So each and every individual is trying to live the way they can, and try to live with the situation. Unless we can have such tolerance, I don't think that we can live on as a human being. And therefore, because of this, I'm trying to defend the Okinawan people, and trying to spread democracy around the world under the U.S.-Japan alliance. I've said this at the United Nations, but the Okinawa prefectures, human rights and freedom and equality and human rights. Nothing is guaranteed by the national government. How can such a country try to share such values of freedom, equality, human rights with others around the world and try to confront a certain country? Is the Japanese government qualified to do such things? This government, which is causing and moving in circles, how can it stand up as a democracy to try to appeal such things? Well, yes, I do think that they have a power to prevent wars, but whether or not they can communicate such values to the world, having seen the U.S.-Japan security and the undignified stance, I very much doubt that.
Allow me to ask questions in Japanese.
So I'm Jimbo from Video News. Governor, in regard to the revoking of the approval of the landfill work, however, if the Japanese government decides to go through with the reclamation work in spite of that, if the citizens were to try to oppose that, would the Okinawa prefectural police, for example, be called upon to perhaps remove those citizens? Does the governor have the right to move and order the police, prefectural police? And in regard to the public security, I believe a great deal of a budget has been allotted to the Okinawa government as well. So can you tell us a little bit about your authority and your involvement with the prefectural police? This is the prefectural police officials basically sit on the same side with me when we are in the assembly meetings, and we respond to questions from the same side, and we check each other's questions and answers in advance and afterwards as well. In other words, we believe that we are pretty much on the same side. However, we do not control them. They are there. Of course, the prefectural police are under the public security council or association in Japan, and they fundamentally are neutral in this regard. For the governor to try to control them is not something that we have done in the past or are thinking of something like that. Or in regard to personnel decisions, these are done by the central government. They have the authority to make various decisions. The only thing that the Okinawa government or governor is involved in is in deciding on specific budgetary questions regarding the prefectural police. So that's an explanation of our involvement.
Are you working press? Yes. Okay.
Nana from Nico Nico Doga. About the public sentiment. Well, yesterday, next year, there would be the Ginowan mayoral election, and Mr. Shimura said that he would run. About the Sakima, who is also trying to be re-elected. And so these are pro-base people. And therefore, it said that it will be a one-on-one competition between the pro-base and also the LDP anti-base candidate. What about this outlook? Well, about the Ginowan mayoral election. About 3 years ago at the election, Futenma was, the candidate who claimed that the relocation should be outside of prefecture won, but the LDP prefectural chapter has changed, so they no longer talk about these things. Now about the public sentiment. Last year, there were 4 elections held. Nago, mayor. Well, there was the Inamine, who is anti-base, won, and also the Nago Assembly. There were 26 seats that were fought, of which more than half were held by anti-base candidates. And in my gubernatorial election, I had 360,000 votes, and my opponent had 260,000. And so I won with 100,000 vote difference. And also, the general election was held last year in December, and there was 295 seats won by the LDP. And using the 60-day rule, they had as many seats that were required to overrun if the lower upper house were to deny. And therefore, included there were the anti-base Okinawan representatives. And next year, there will be on January 24th, the Ginowan mayoral election. And last year, when I opposed the construction of Henoko, there were 360,000 votes cast. And in Ginowan, also, I won by 3,000 votes. And also, there are the anti-Henoko assembly members who won 6,000 votes, and therefore I think that the fact that in Henoko also that there will be a mayoral means that there will be anti-base candidates who are highly likely to win, and this land which have been confiscated by from the Okinawan people, and therefore it is our position that all of Japan should shoulder this burden and not just Okinawa, and the fact that this approach is being taken and imposed on Okinawa is something that we cannot accept, and therefore I think this is winning support. Well, when Mr. Nakaima gave the approval, one of the major reasons was because within 5 years, Futenma would not be operated. While Henoko is being constructed, within 5 years, Futenma Air Base would be in a situation where no planes would take off from there. The Prime Minister and Chief Cabinet Secretary promised this, but what's happening now is that because I won, who is opposed to Henoko, this is to be nullified. But Mr. Nakaima, the next year, after he gave the permit, they're saying that they're going to calculate the 5 years from that day. And during this time, the U.S. officials are saying that this is not acceptable. They cannot stop operation of Futenma in 5 years. So there are a lot of oppositions to this. And the Japanese government on this point, well, Mr. Nakaima and myself, when we were fighting the election, it was not clear who would win. And for 8 months during that time, efforts should have been made. But this 5-year operational stop, nothing was done during the election period, and therefore I think this was a blank check. So, from this perspective as well, I think that I'm very doubtful as to how things will proceed, and also the Futenma mayoral election. I'm sure that the anti-base candidate would win. So, be it in Ginowan or Futenma or all those places, I think the opponents will be able to voice their opinion more strongly.
Okay, thank you. Manzuro?
Thank you very much. I'm Manzurul Haq. I represent Pathomala from Bangladesh. There had been a gradually raising voice in Okinawa. Some people are calling for independence of the land. And if the confrontation continues, I think their support will increase day by day. What's your position on that? How do you think that, and how you evaluate their position? Thank you.
When we consider the history of Okinawa, of course, we understand that there are many, many countries in the world, many, many areas in the world that have different histories, and there are, as a result, many people with different ideas and anxieties and thoughts about the history of Okinawa. But in regard to independence, if sometimes I get a similar question, I receive a similar question, are you thinking about trying to obtain independence? But in 1952, as I mentioned, for Japan to be able to receive its independence, it basically cut off Okinawa. That is what happened to us. So from our point of view, the idea of gaining independence is something that we must consider on top of this foundation of our history. This idea of the right to self-determination, this is something that historically we have been deprived of for decades and decades. Even now, even our seas are being taken away from us by bayonets and guns and bulldozers. The idea of our beautiful waters, our beautiful lands being taken away in this way is something that I think people, even in the mainland of Japan, can understand that it is something that should be fought against. Democracy is being called into question in Japan now. When we're looking at Fukushima, we see that there are people who are victims of government policies of the past, and yet these victims, despite of their suffering, the Japanese government tends always to take a rather cold shoulder attitude toward these victims. They do many things in a positive way. They have made an appeal, the Japanese government has made an appeal to the government, to the world, about how the government is trying to revitalize the Tohoku economy after the terrible earthquake in 2011. But when we look at the things that are being done politically, we wonder if the government really does take care of its victims, really does care about the people who are suffering. We believe that democracy is based on these principles, that you do not cut off people who are beneath your concern, or who, in other words, I think we must think about the fact that, and discuss and deliberate amongst ourselves about the nature of and situation of democracy in Japan, whether it is a truly healthy and sound one. When we think that Okinawa could play a vital role in the further development of the Japanese economy, we could serve as a gateway to the rest of Asia, which is showing a tremendous economic growth. We can be a bridge, a link toward, between a link. We can have exchanges go through Okinawa. We believe that we can link together Japan and the rest of Asia. For a long time, Japan was isolated from China. We believe that we see all of these other nations are surrounding China. Okinawa had very great maritime trade with the Philippines, Vietnam, and China, many other countries as well. In other words, we've had a long history. We're a very tiny little group of islands, but we've had a very, very long history of having connections and relationships with these other countries of Asia. And we believe that we can become a buffer zone in a peaceful way, not in a military way, between Japan and the rest of Asia, the rest of the world. We believe that our history shows that we have been successful as a kingdom. We have over 100, we have over 160 little islands. 40 or more are inhabited. We have had a long history of having peaceful trade-based relations with many, many nations, and we believe we can continue to preserve a peaceful role for the future. And that is why we are so much against these bases of the militarization or the emphasis on military aspects in Okinawa. We believe in peace. We've always believed in peace and peaceful commerce and economy and trade.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the Japanese press? 日本の記者からも
Are there any questions from the Japanese press? Please raise your hand.
I guess you're, yes, next.
Siegfried Nidl, writing for the Austrian newspaper, Der Standard. I think if you will revoke the allowance to build the base, the result will be a court battle for many years. But what does it mean for the building of the bases? Does the government still build the base? And if you win in 5 years, perhaps the base has been finished, built. What does it So how would you react to this? What would you think? Can you stop the building the base until the court battle is decided, or what would you do?
Well, whether or not I can stop the construction of the base, well, at the United Nations, when I delivered my speech also, I said that Japan's democracy and the U.S. democracy, well, in other words, the freedom, equality, human rights, and democracy of the Okinawan people have been neglected under the U.S.-Japan security alliance. And I tried to alarm the world about this situation. I wanted people to pay attention to this. Both the U.S. and Japanese government are using their power, and if we were to try to fight against them, everyone thinks that Okinawa has no way of winning the battle. But for 27 years, we have been under the rule of the U.S. military without any nationality, and we have been ignored of our human rights. And though we're a small island, we have continued to fight one after the other to try to build up our human rights. We have this power, this strength, and therefore, as the government, the Japanese Constitution, or the Japanese laws, under the law, legally, we will try to cancel this permit. And as for Okinawa, that beautiful sea, well, looking at the environmental issues around the world, it is not forgivable that the coral reefs be destroyed by the reclamation. I say this to the mainlanders. If it's for the sake of national security, would you landfill Lake Towada or Lake Biwa? Those people cannot do it in their home ground. How dare they try to build such a base in Okinawa is something that makes me question about the democracy of Japan. And therefore, it will take several years, and also the Abe administration, the longest will last 3 years, and next year will be the upper house election, and the national people's voices will be made clear at that point in time, and therefore Okinawa Prefecture would like to make our position clear, and I think that the people's public sentiment will change in Japan. Well, normally it takes 10 years for such court cases, but within that, Nago City and the Okinawa prefectural government have various authorities, powers, and therefore using this, we will try to get the will to see what is happening and try to get people to see what is happening under the U.S.-Japan security regime and try to see for solutions.
Sorry, I had just a quick follow-up. I know in your statement you were talking about the percentage of U.S. bases that are located in Okinawa. But as a percentage of overall military bases in Japan, Okinawa has a low proportion, or is it actually very high compared to, say, other prefectures? And then the other question is, on that issue, I guess your opposition is more because of the way the bases were acquired and because they're U.S. bases? Is that more the case?
In regard to Okinawa Prefecture, compared to other prefectures, whether the bases are more or less in terms of quantity, we represent 0.6% of the total land of Japan, but 73.8% of the U.S. bases are located in Okinawa. So when you look at the 0.6% and 73.8% per capita or per person, in other words, the Okinawa person has 800 times the burden of bearing the U.S. bases in comparison to the people outside of Okinawa Prefecture. And on top of that, the fact that we never voluntarily offered our land, please do not misunderstand. Some people think that we voluntarily offered this land because we wanted income from the rent of the land from the U.S. military. That's not at all the case at all. As I've said repeatedly, it was through bayonets bayonets, guns, swords, and bulldozers that this land was forcibly taken away from us, seized from us, as a result of the San Francisco Peace Treaty, when Japan and Okinawa basically were separated. After that, it was only after 1950, when the Korean War broke out, that suddenly we began to see many bases being built throughout Japan. For example, even in Gifu, other places as well. But after the Korean War ended, there was a great deal of resentment among people throughout the nation towards these U.S. bases, and there was a great protest movement against the U.S. bases. And so, what was the response? All of the Marines, which until then had not been based in Okinawa, all of them were sent to Okinawa. In other words, the head of the U.S. military basically was stationed in Okinawa, and so the officers brought all of the Marines to Okinawa. It used to be that we had all of these little dirt paths where the citizens of Okinawa would walk along quite freely, but suddenly, after the end of the Korean War, with the resentment toward U.S. bases in other parts of Japan, all of these bases and military facilities and personnel were brought to Japan because as Okinawa really basically had no rights, Okinawa citizens had no voice, and they had no way to protest. And what I say very strongly about whenever this subject comes up is that after the Korean War, all these military personnel were brought to Okinawa. But where were the bases at that time? They were in the northern part of Kyushu. The majority were at the northern part of Kyushu because that was the closest part to the Korean Peninsula. So right now, if North Korea is a danger and a possible threat in terms of missiles that might be sent, you should have missiles not in Okinawa but in the northern part of Kyushu, because that would be the best way to shoot down any possible missiles from North Korea. But for whatever reasons, it's considered that would present a danger to the people of northern part of Kyushu. However, it is apparently not a danger for the people of Okinawa, so therefore missiles are perhaps going to be deployed in our prefecture. So it's only natural that we in Okinawa ask ourselves, what in the world is the Japanese government thinking of us? What in the world are the Japanese people thinking about us? Please understand.
That 83% of, I think, Japanese military bases are not in Okinawa. So does that mean 17% of Japanese military bases are in Okinawa as well? And then I'll go to gentleman over there. Yeah.
Well, for 27 years, we were under the administration of the United States, and therefore Okinawa Prefecture, up until 44 years, were all occupied by U.S. military installments. And once this is not necessary, Naha Airport, there are a lot of tourists. There are some 7.2 million visitors coming to Naha, and near the airport there is a big SDF base, and this is facing up to China. I won't give you the numbers, but anyway, yes, so this is a huge U.S. military base, and also there is Yonaguni, which is closest to Taiwan, and there will be a base built there. And also Defense Minister Nakatani, when he visited us the other day, and also at the Diet, saying that he said that he secured the budget to do this. Yes, I think that the base will be, but Miyako, Ishigaki, there will be some SDF forces in the order of some hundreds of servicemen. There are 11 plus prefectures where the SDF deployed, and also there are some U.S. base in various prefectures. But all combined, Okinawa's bases, I think, is like a fortress, and becoming an island like a fortress, an unsinkable aircraft carrier.
Was there a lady in the back also? Are you working press? Okay.
Okay, Benjamin Fulford, Weekly Geopolitical News and Analysis. I'd like to ask my question in Japanese.
Listening to your response, Governor, Okinawa's U.S. bases are designed to protect Japan from China. That seems to be the rationale, but you don't think that is necessarily the case. You say military experts don't think that's truly the case. Then why are those U.S. bases based in Okinawa, according to your thoughts? What I was saying earlier, I don't know how it may have sounded. I'm not saying that we're not, the U.S. bases in China, in Okinawa, are against direct, are effective in, are not effective in protecting Japan from China. All I was trying to say was that it shouldn't just be Okinawa that defends Japan from China. It should be all of the Japanese people that defend Japan against China. It shouldn't just be the Okinawans that shed blood if some kind of a conflagration arises. That's all I am saying. If Soviet is going to, if Russia is going to be a threat, then maybe you should have U.S. bases up in Hokkaido, up in the north, or Tohoku. There's no reason that, I'm not saying that China is not a threat that Okinawa could do something about, the U.S. bases in Okinawa could do something about. I'm just saying that it seems that all of the work of the U.S. bases is centered around Okinawa, and that's not fair. That's all I'm saying.
Your working press?
フリーのジャーナリストの横田。
はじめ横田 freelance writer. Well, there is an all Japan slogan under the all coined after all Okinawa, and trying to put a stop to Prime Minister Okinawa. And this is there any collaboration to try to promote how you're doing all Okinawa and trying to get others to copy this into all Japan? Can you talk about the approach that you want to take? Well, about all Okinawa. Well, I think for a long time we have built up our forces to do this, and I think this is not something that the communists or the rather conservatives and also the reformist camps wanted to see this, so we had the rape incident, and also a plane crashing into a primary school, and also cars running over Okinawans, and these servicemen have not been punished, and therefore the Okinawa people are emphasizing the need for human rights and pride as people. And so in the post-war period, we have been seeing a collaboration between the conservatives and the reformists. But there is the Asian dynamism, and Okinawa, we have tourism and ICT industries which make us self-reliant, and therefore the reformists, after the Cold War has ended, and also the 1955 system has ended, they're rethinking. But what's not changed is the Okinawa base, and so we have as many as 73.8% of all the U.S. military installments in this land, which only accounts for 0.6% of the national land. And so, therefore, the reformists and the conservatives cannot confront each other. We have to join hands to confront the central government, because if we were to confront each other, of course, from the Japanese and also the U.S. government, we only have a power of some hundreds of 100 million, and therefore the conservatives and reformists are joining hands, and this is one Okinawa. And so the serious person who is trying to promote all Japan, I think such thinking is important. But what Okinawa has been experiencing in the past, and if it's something that can benefit others, we'd be more than happy to try to tell them what we have been doing in the past. But looking at the current situation, I think that yes, we have one dominant LDP, and it's not all Okinawa, but these minorities, the opposition, I think that they have to join hands. That might be different from Okinawa, but still, in terms of Japan's democracy, that will be beneficial.
Okay, thank you. もう一問大丈夫ですか？
私は大丈夫です。
大丈夫ですか？
So one more question.
Just a quick follow-up.
I'm Jimbo from Video News. last time when you came, I think there were many, many questions about what are you going to do? What is Okinawa going to do? But basically what you're saying now is that it's not an Okinawa problem anymore. It's very much a nationwide problem. It's a problem for all of Japan. I think you said that at the end of the press conference last time as well, too. And we're seeing now with the security legislation movement that young people are beginning to take part in these kinds of political debates. So it's been a couple of months since your last visit here. So in regard to how people feel about Okinawa, how people in the mainland, the media in the mainland feel or react in regard to or think about Okinawa, have you seen any changes in the stance or views of Okinawa over the past couple of months on the part of the mainlanders? Since I've become governor, it's been about 1 year. About a year has passed. And in regard to the movements that we've had in Tokyo, all of the Okinawa's representatives have joined in the demonstrations, especially in regard to the Henoko issue. I've spoken, of course, repeatedly with various officials, government officials, and I think all of that has been reported by the press. I think more than 10% of the people in Japan, of course, depending on the surveys, there are slight differences, but I think about 40% feel that the bases should remain as they are, and 30% say they should be removed, and 20% there should be no, bases in Okinawa. The interpreter is not quite sure she got those figures right and would like someone to reconfirm them later. But the point is, I'm saying that although generally there are 60% are against security legislation, in other words, and 30% are for legislation. I think there's about twice as many people against the security legislation. I think there are similar trends we're seeing in regard to what is happening with the Okinawa issue. In other words, I think there's a positive trend with more support going our way. And not only that, but the people of Okinawa are thinking ahead about the political world. In regard to divisions within Okinawa among political lines, people are beginning to realize even more and more, day by day, that we must all come together, that they are beginning to think that when we look at the proceedings that are taking place, the actual procedures that take place by the national government, regardless of which political party is in power or which is not, whether they're large or small, in other words, we can't rely necessarily on the national government or national political parties. We must all come together as one Okinawa. And I think that kind of thinking has become even stronger over the past couple of months. And I think that security legislation, the forcing of that security legislation through large numbers, I think whether that is now going to, what's going to happen afterwards is a big question. In other words, is that going to rouse even more anti-base sentiment in Okinawa, or is there now going to be a concerted effort by the national government to sort of divide the people of Okinawa along political lines into different groups, etc.? We are hoping there, however, and I think the trend, however, is in a positive direction for us.
Very much. We've run out of time for further questions. And just a brief announcement. We've actually tried to get government officials and ministers and also LDP policy people to come and talk about these issues, not just the Futema issue and Heneko issue, but also sort of the other issues in terms of the Okinawan economy and other issues. And for basically the past year, we haven't really had any good response from the government or the LDP. And I recently spoke to Mr. Nikai of the LDP, and hopefully we will be able to get someone from the LDP to discuss some of these issues, because it's always good to get the different sides in a discussion, and that's something that we are earnestly pursuing. But anyway, I would like to thank Governor Onaga again for coming to speak at the FCCJ. Especially after such a busy schedule, and I imagine just coming from Geneva, you're probably a bit jet-lagged, after such a short trip. And so, as is our usual custom, I think you already have an honorary membership, but we will give you another honorary membership, and I don't know if those can be consecutive, but at some point I hope we can have you come speak at the club again, and not talk just about sort of the base issues, but some of the other fundamental issues that Okinawa is facing, such as the economy, such as the issues that you've mentioned, including tourism becoming an IT hub as well as a distribution hub, which is something I know that's being pursued. So there are many other issues that would be interesting to talk about, not just this one base issue. Anyway, thank you very much.